Hello everyone, welcome back to the TJOmega channel for day 1007 of our daily content streak. We're giving Transformers a bit of a breather, because even I have to do something different once in a while, because something stirred up in the Power Ranger community again. I do like me some Power Rangers, you know me, I love the originals, I'm a Sentai fan, but it's been a rough year for Power Ranger fans. Frankly, it's been rough for a few years now, but it just seems like 2024 is the year rather, for the franchise and its fans to just get ground into the dirt as hard as possible. So, we have a brand new report out that says that the Power Ranger series that Netflix was working on has been canceled. So, reading from comicbook.com here. Power Ranger fans have been waiting diligently for any news regarding the in-development Netflix live-action series, but unfortunately the news as of now is far from what they hoped to hear. TV Line has confirmed that the live-action series is no longer moving forward at Netflix via an original report from Jinsaku, and Hasbro Entertainment, who own the franchise, will now explore a new creative direction for the show and a new partner. So yeah, Actually, through all of the bad news for Power Rangers, I totally forgot that they were supposed to be working on, there was a reboot movie that they were planning on, and yeah, there was a new live action at Netflix that they were working on. And yeah, I guess this isn't a surprise. So, something like this, I could speculate on, and I have speculated on it. It might be the way that the toy sales have gone that made Netflix get cold feet about continuing. It might have been just too expensive to continue producing or with what Hasbro or Netflix wanted in mind. Hasbro may not have wanted to put out enough money to keep the project going. We do have some insight. So from here on out, I will be quoting some prominent fans in the Power Ranger community. They are podcasters, they have good followings, they have their connections. So take all of it with a grain of salt, because it's all coming secondhand knowledge, but I don't have any reason to really disagree or dispute it. And when you start to hear this, a lot of things start making sense. So we're going to start with a post from Dr. Kane that was relinked over at TFW 2005, but to be honest with you, I have no idea where the original post was, but it's public post, so we're going to go through it. So, Kane says, the reason the reboot got pushed off for too long was because it's expensive. Enswile and Jenny wanted to take the brand more serious and do a 2007 movie-style show with money put into it and an overall more mature story. And expensive suits that would look like maybe Toku J was involved in. The failure of that 2017 movie had Hasbro scared and worried, so they pitched a cheaper and traditional-style show without Enswile, probably Mighty Morphin, to Netflix, but Netflix didn't want it. Netflix wanted to do the reboot. Netflix didn't want Cosmic Fury or Once and Always, but since money and contracts was involved, that happened. Netflix walked away from the negotiation because they never got the show and movie they were promised in 2021. At the end of the day, Brian Goldner, the original CEO, the previous CEO of Hasbro rather, who bought the Power Rangers, had a big vision for the franchise, but Cox, that's Chris Cox, the current CEO, isn't interested in putting money or doing the new universe. He just wants to save money and not spend on a brand he doesn't care for, which is why the right for the show will be sold off next year. So keep in mind that's just the rights for television and movie production. That is not the franchise itself, which has been hot potatoed across owners for, the last couple decades. So we have a little bit of context for here. So there's a big disagreement between exactly what to do with the franchise, and that kind of makes sense, right? So do you do live action? Do you do whatever? I can understand that. When they talk about the failure of the 2017 movie, they're really talking about box office performance. And when your Netflix and your big profit is getting people to watch something, basing a product off of what is a failure at that point, yeah, that's not a good look. But why would you want, if the movie failed, if the movie bombed, why would Hasbro originally pitch an idea that was based on the live action movie? that is because of the toy sales. And this is likely why Brian Goldner originally wanted the Power Ranger brand in the first place, because in 2017, the brand, for the first time in well over a decade, was once again the #1 action figure brand. That's kind of a big deal. And when a brand like that is up for grabs and you are a big toy company like Hasbro, okay, I can actually see how that would be very, very appealing. So I can understand why. But as we said, Netflix is all about the viewing product. They don't get a thing off of toy sales, or at least very little from royalties and such. So if they're going to put the money into a series, they would rather it be a little bit more surefire, something a little bit more certain to actually be seen, not based on something that already failed. I can understand that, it's still weird though. It's still a weird situation. Who'd have thought, like, the whole reason this Power Ranger franchise exists now, in the state that it's in, is because the movie flopped, but the toys did extremely well, which is fascinating, isn't it? We do have a little bit more that we can talk about here. So this comes from Living Ranger Key over on Twitter. With today's news, I feel comfortable sharing that in July of last year, right after I leaked the ending of Lightning Collection, I got more DMs from more sources than ever. Learned Brian Goldner's purchase of the brand and E1 apparently was done without consulting R&D, research and development. The company never wanted Power Rangers. That's kind of a big deal. So understand, when you are talking about the Power Rangers, you're not just talking about a toy franchise that you can just buy and produce new toys from and guarantee sales. There's a lot that goes into the Power Ranger franchise. We talk about, like, the quality control problems that Lightning Collection had and all that, and how, everything that Hasbro was doing with the brand. But when you think about it, it's an enormous brand because it has so many different requirements to it. You need to be doing some kind of TV show, and it has to be live action because that's the only way to make it affordable. Keep in mind, this is a franchise that technically has been on life support ever since Wild Force. Moving the production over to New Zealand was the only way anyone was willing to continue it because that made filming so much cheaper. And that is basically how the franchise has survived. Find ways of making it cheaper, not making it more successful, but making that the returning, the diminishing returns from the franchise still be significant enough, meaning the origin of the franchise had to be as cheap as possible. So that makes sense. That kind of makes sense why everything Power Ranger wise at Hasbro seemed to be lacking. But it's not only that. You need to produce a toy line for that current show. It has to be something centered for kids, so gimmick loaded, the Megazords and all that. And then there's the collector lines, because Power Ranger collectors want 6-inch figures. We want large-scale articulated Megazords. So you were talking about 3 different branches. It's no wonder they had to buy a production company just to keep the live-action shows going, on top of all the other expenses this brand is incurring. Keep in mind, Hasbro kind of lives on its old brands and keeping them in rotation. But when you look at it, the only brand that comes close to this kind of demand is Transformers, Hasbro's biggest franchise. Well, toy franchise. I know Magic the Gathering does very well for them. Point being, when you look at it, G.I. Joe only needs to have the classified line and occasionally a retro line. That's really all G.I. Joe ever has to do. Marvel, well, Marvel does Disney handles everything as far as like the TV show and the movie portion. So all they have to do is produce a kid's toy line for the current show or movie and the collector's line, the Legends. And the same is exactly true of Star Wars with their kids, with the simple action figure lines for kids and the Black Series. Power Rangers requires all the same attention and focus as Transformers, right down to constantly developing the brand new version of Power Rangers, whether that be a TV show or movie. So you're basically asking an R&D department that's already overloaded to handle another franchise that requires just as much as the largest franchise they're handling. That is probably why Goldner didn't inform R&D, because he probably knew they would nix it based on just on how much manpower and resources it would require. Understandable, actually. I think I get it at that point. So, the previous tweet from Living Ranger Key did come with a receipt, so I do want to make mention of that as well. For Power Rangers, there's been significant confusion and disagreement on what to do with the brand. One proposal was to cancel the live-action series and switch to animation, fixing the problem about rotating casts. Researchers also found that the core audience of 5 to 7-year-olds focus more on the color of the Rangers, so it probably would help if the Rangers are always the same, like how Bruce Wayne is Batman. Remember, there were rumors for years of Power Rangers going animated swirling around, and it looks like this is the source. People in Hasbro actually considering that as a very viable move. Lastly, buying Power Rangers in E1 was done without checking in with Hasbro Research Development. After the deals were in place, some in Hasbro spent months working through the details and trying to post-fiasco justify the purchase decisions. So yeah, this was a line that no one in Hasbro really wanted to touch because, well, a lot of Hasbro employees are where they are because they know those franchises so well. They grew up as fans of Transformers, G.I. Joe, Marvel, Star Wars, and you want those people in those positions. So now you either have to hire on dozens, if not 100 new people just to handle this Power Ranger brand just as well, or you have to chop up your existing teams and just put people in and hope for the best, which apparently didn't work out. This explains a lot of the decisions that were made when it comes to the Power Ranger brand and just why everything's felt so off about Hasbro's Power Ranger toys. You know, why did the Zap Megazords feel so cheaply produced? Why were the QC issues so high? Why do you have lines like Dino Fury, where you have the potential for a really fun toy line, and then it's cut short because you don't really want to create the toys necessary for it? You know, that was a really fun Megazord system. We have reviewed it on this channel. Those toys are surprisingly fun. It's like Lego Zords. But those 4 little ones you see below the T-Rex, those are the only little ones they produced. Even though in Japan there were lots of auxiliary Zords that they could have chosen, that could have appeared in the show, that could have had toys. So, you know, when you're doing all the larger figures for that year, you have new dinos to combine them with. Instead, you end up with the same old 4 that were overproduced to the point where I could go down to my local Ollie's liquidation store and buy as many as I want right now. I hate what they did. And I remember a lot of people complaining about the limitations they implied in that line. And that is something that kind of went through all of Hasbro's lines that were about the current Power Ranger series. They all seemed like they were lacking. Even in distribution, I could never find the Cheetah Zord in person during Beast Morphers. Couldn't find it anywhere. So it does start to explain why this is such a lacking franchise, right? I mentioned the QC issues, and that brings up another weird note that somebody brought up. This is from Mr. Cooper92. Again, someone in the community that has audience. Again, I don't have a reason to really doubt this, but this one may be a grain of salt with. Can we talk about how the Power Rangers brand was treated as the punishment brand, and that some of the QC issues were intentional to get back at the higher-ups at Hasbro? So remember, we're dealing with a team for Power Rangers that really didn't want to be there. You know, they spent entire careers at Hasbro working on specific brands. They were experts in that brand. And now all of a sudden they have to tackle something that for decades they had to treat as their competition, their biggest rival. Remember, Power Rangers is the whole reason why every boys franchise struggled in the 90s, because that line was indomitable. It was a juggernaut. It was the line, it was the franchise that finally dethroned Ninja Turtles. And it would be a long, long time before any brand came close to that level of success. So when you're taking employees at Hasbro who have spent 2 decades seeing that as an enemy and now going, now you have to work on it. Then you would see why, yeah, problems occur. And believe it or not, I could actually see that to be true. Because here's my favorite one, from Buchas. I'm going to let you read it because I'm going to butcher it if I try to mention his name. But Buchasaru. We'll go with Buchasaru, who has my favorite QC error in any of the Lightning collection, and that being the fact that here we have a Lost Galaxy Green Ranger with Mighty Morphin boots on, which seems like a huge oversight. Keep in mind, Hasbro does these toys all the time. They are experts at 6-inch action figures at this point. From Star Wars, Marvel, G.I. Joe, even Transformers had a 6-inch action figure line for a while. And through all of this, I have never seen a QC issue like this before, where the buck from one figure is used on another, where the molds actually got mixed up. And this isn't even a matter of them confusing Green Rangers. Remember, in Mighty Morphin, Tommy's boot design is different from the rest of the Rangers. So this is a Green Ranger with the male normal Mighty Morphin legs attached to it. Not even like mixing up the Green Ranger molds here. That's pretty egregious. And considering Hasbro gets all these other figures produced, I don't see a Duke action figure with Roadblock's legs. You don't see that happening. So this is either an enormous screw up or, this might have been something intentional. Because if you are an employee that really hates what you've done, that what your big employer has forced you to do, you might look for ways of getting back at them that isn't going to directly result in you getting fired. You might actually do something like this. I'm not saying anyone did, but I'm saying that this kind of corroborates just why there are so many QC problems in this franchise. And apparently that did have blowback. So this is Geek with Chris. So Toku Chris from from Toku Network and all that, or Toku Nation rather. It's a real dream to work on the Power Rangers team. No one at Hasbro ever said this. A 25-plus year Hasbro employee got bounced to Power Rangers, fought management to make sure a toy received proper paint, and then was laid off soon after. We go back to the idea of Power Rangers has to be produced as cheaply as possible in order to survive. And again, this kind of tells you why QC was so low. Why they tried to cut corners, like Dino Thunder's White Ranger helmet being improperly painted. What was probably originally a cost-cutting maneuver ended up upsetting so many people, it ended up becoming more expensive to fix the paint later on. It's things like that. It's how, it's like things like the Lightning collection being, so hit and miss with QC, poorly assembled, incorrect parts, accessories missing. It's things like the Zap project, the Zap toys, Zord Ascension project, whatever you want to call it. My Megazord is rickety and loaded with QC issues. He's got a fist that won't attach because the ball joint is completely mismolded. It's the Pteranodon, the pterodactyl, will not stay on his chest for anything. It pops off on a moment's notice. On top of the fact that it just feels rickety, it's a display piece and that's it. And, I almost want to say the same of the Astro Mega Ship, which is slightly better, but it just reeks of just little things wrong with it. And that's just kind of how everything with it felt, Why are the Zap Megazords so inconsistent? Why are they so low quality when this is the Transformer people that should be great at this? Why are why are the monsters for the Lightning collection so much bigger than the Ranger toys? Why are the yearly lines for the actual TV show so lacking in options when in Japan the Sentai had loads of them? It's just, and when you boil it all down to Hasbro is just being as lazy and cheap as possible because they didn't want the brand and were just trying to recoup some expense. Now, this kind of makes sense. Now, this kind of makes sense. So yeah, they can be outlandish, all these accusations and these tweets, but it makes sense in the whole. And for some, it feels like the only explanation for why things turned out the way they did. So, why didn't they learn from 2017? So, obviously, Brian Goldner saw real potential because of the toy sales, and then Chris Cox kind of vetoed the entire franchise because he didn't see the value in it anymore. And admittedly, Power Rangers is a very difficult brand to find value in because it's been on life support for so long. It's been, such a minor player on the toy shelves for years now. But the thing they didn't take away from 2017 was why the toys themselves were actually successful. They were different. Power Rangers has been stagnant for 25 years. The same old thing over and over. You can change the Zords. You can change the overall design style. But basically, it's still people in spandex suits fighting grunts. The monster gets big. A big robot blows up the monster. We all learn a lesson for the day. And guess what? In a series, in an age where, the most popular kids cartoons have these deep, rich characters or long stories, or they have these, this amount of lore behind them that gets you talking about them for years, or has surprisingly complex characters for having such simple designs or even simple stories episode to episode. When this is what kids get for entertainment these days, the Power Ranger formula just doesn't work anymore. The simple designs don't work anymore. Why didn't you learn from what worked in 2017? That's to explore for another day. For now, we just kind of lament that it just seems like everything Power Rangers is coming up tails right now. I'm hoping for the best for the franchise. I don't want the franchise to fail, but they have to figure out what exactly is wrong with it, and they have to actually fix it. And they got to get someone who's actually willing to spend the money and take the risk on making Power Rangers a thing again. Give it let it rest for a few years, bring it back in a new, fresh way. I got my own thoughts on that, which we'll probably explore for another day. For now, I've talked your ear off enough about something that isn't Transformers, so I'll leave it at that. Let me know what you think of the Power Ranger situation in the comments below. Does it feel like the brand was never wanted by Hasbro? Because it feels that way. Now that it's pointed out, yeah, it really feels that way. So, you're free to discuss. But while you do, thank you everyone for watching, and I will see you next time.